we need to face reality and we need to adapt to it. But you got to be careful sometimes if life is a little too easy or a little too euphoric. That's not real. What's the only promises were those three things. And so if you're based in that environment, I can start believing what you're deriving is based on truth.
We'll go into the fasting in a little bit, but I'm curious to know, how did your visit to Mount Athos, the renowned monastic community there, how did it influence your perspective as a doctor, and then with connection to, obviously, your walk with God, and then into that diet as well? Welcome to the Revo Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reason with faith.
Yeah, so I guess part of what's so amazing about Mount Athos is it's just been around for so long. It's a World UNESCO Heritage Site. So just first and foremost, it's a beautiful place. It's a historical place. And even secular society recognizes there's something special going on there. But when you visit there, you start to understand that these traditions and practices and belief in Christianity, for that matter, really go back a long time. And, to give you a sense of just the caliber of this place, I think actually Hitler himself had an interest in the majesty and mysticism of that island. He didn't want people going there and screwing with it. It's a place that essentially houses 23 different monasteries within the Orthodox faith worldwide, and there's 300 million of us worldwide. We call ourselves Romanian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox or Russian Orthodox, but that just basically means we have a language that's local and that you express yourself through that local language. And there's little mini traditions that come off of it, but theologically they're all the same. And only men are allowed being there. And the reason for that is the entire peninsula in this region of Greece is dedicated to the Mother of God, the Panaya, as we call her, which means all holy. That's the translation, Panaya. And essentially, you go there and you recognize there are these thousands of monks who all look like Gandalf, who are living in castles like you would expect out of Narnia or something. And they've been there for at least 1,200 years. And it's really the oldest surviving government in the world that still is active today in terms of just, presence. And so you go there and you go to these monasteries where they have a very interesting program of when they eat, when they sleep, when they pray. Some of their vigils can last 24 hours. They have services, basically for every day of the year. And they're all there trying to pray, to battle this issue of, or this saga between good and evil. And so as a teenager, when I was there for the first time, it first became very clear to me that this Orthodox church, this Christian church I was a part of, is really, there is something big going on. The architecture is beautiful. The iconography is beautiful. The food is delicious, but at the same time is plant-based. And then everything surrounds the services and its schedule. With that said, you kind of leave that place realizing oh my gosh, I go back to my Sunday rule or I go to church here or something, but there is a part of Christianity that really could occupy every minute of your life. And that's how it's been done for a very long time. So isn't it interesting that in the peace and quiet and solitude of this place is a lifestyle that emerges, not intentionally, but emerges as a result of that focus on God that literally sustains them across their lives, so that people who are in their 80s, 90s, and 100s don't have dementia. They don't have Parkinson's. They don't have Alzheimer's. They don't have other neurodegenerative diseases that are usually quite prominent and quite common in that age group. As they started to look at these communities and how their longevity is longer and how their quality of life is higher, you start seeing that through a Christian perspective, but you try to understand it maybe through a medicinal perspective, a scientific perspective, and you realize it's not just about what they eat or how much they eat, but when they eat. And suddenly, all of these things start to synchronize and align, and there's some really incredible wisdom to be found and shared with the world there.
Man, that is wild. Was there a really memorable experience that you had when you were visiting there that deepened your understanding of faith and health?
I would just emphasize that there are still adventures to be had in 2025. The place is just so magical. And I remember walking through these hiking trails from monastery to monastery. I was with my twin brother. I was with my uncle, who's actually a theologian. He's a professor at Holy Cross Seminary in Boston, and my papu, my grandfather. And we were just walking with our backpacks, going from monastery to monastery, seeking hospitality, going for services, going to the next place, and it was such an adventure. And to know that type of, like I said, like Narnia, Lord of the Rings experience can be recreated in the modern day, it just made you feel like something really magical still exists. Like there's still a magic that exists that if you care to foster it and find it, you can participate in that. And so that always gave me a sense of not just taking things for superficial, not just taking things for what they seem to be, but maybe trying to go a level deeper. And that way of looking at things has helped me a lot. And certainly has found a place for me in breaking into this world of fasting and why it's so powerful.
And what really sets the Athos diet apart from other? There's a million diets out there, right?
Yeah.
What sets it apart from the others, do you think?
Well, I would just say this. I believe that the Athos diet is Christian fasting done right. And, it's so funny. Today is the first day of Great Lent. And if you go back to the New Testament, we just read this yesterday, but it says that when you fast, don't let others know. And don't cover yourself in essentially ashes and other things that make you feel others like you're suffering or you're. What's so interesting about that passage, and as I've kind of realized what fasting is supposed to be, is that my litmus test to you is if your fasting rule makes you feel low energy, down, subdued, then you're doing it wrong. Because in the New Testament, it says when you fast, cover yourself in oil, be radiant. And again, in my opinion is, if you're doing fasting right, and that's why I'm trying to share that with the world as a doctor, if you're doing it right, you will look radiant. You will have more energy. Your life will be longer. You will be void of 80 to 90% of all disease. And in that regard, the stakes are very, very high. And so fasting, in my opinion, again, especially as we get to the Western world and we realize that we can't outspend disease. It's impossible. That we have to have something as meek, as universal, low cost, and Christian with the capital C that can really save us. And that's what fasting's supposed to be. It's supposed to be God's salve to the suffering of this world so that it makes the work a little lighter and the pain a little less, or the pain a little more tolerable. And so in that regard, I think that's what the Athos diet really is. It's Christian fasting done right so that when you do it, you can emerge to what we're supposed to be, which is radiant and bold and able. And certainly we get reflective and deep, but we have to be careful that we have parameters that make sure we're getting healing of both soul and body. Soul and body. These phrases oftentimes are combined. These words are combined in the New Testament. And so we need to heal both. And that's what fasting does very well.